Can I be anybody that I want to be?
Well, you... Actually...
A specific person. He looks perfectly average. He's a remarkable nobody that just shows up. He just occupies the space like an awkward guest at a party that no one really knows.
It's perfect. It's my second choice, but it's wonderful.
Okay, let's explore this. This might get us somewhere interesting.
My name is Devyn.
My name is George.
And this is Medicinema, your healthy dose of film.
Today, we are going to talk about two dream-related movies, with the 1999 being John Malkovich and the 2023 Dream Scenario. Before that, however, I want to quickly address that I have been sick for the last week and I might still sound a bit off today. And another thing happened. Mia Goth and A24 got into troubles on set of Maxine.
Yeah, so why don't you remind us what exactly happened here? Or what the accusations that happened here are?
Yeah, so an extra sued both Mia Goth and A24 the studio. So the story goes that he was hired as kind of a dead person on set, basically, and Mia Goth in a scene has to walk over him, has to put steps over him. She's supposed to not actually touch him and just walks beside him. And in one of the takes, apparently, her foot got really close to his face. So he then, after the take, complained that it was kind of uncomfortable for him. After which, apparently, Mia Goth in the next take straight up kicked him as kind of a revenge, I guess. Petty revenge.
Yeah.
After the whole shooting, in a backstage situation, according to this guy, Mia Goth confronted him and was like, "Now what you gonna do about it? Complain? Let's try that." Supposedly, the dude felt very lightheaded for the rest of the day, had a concussion, and he was supposed to be shooting 2 more days, but in the early next morning got a call that he's not supposed to show up for the other 2 days of shooting. So that's kind of the reason he also sues A24, because according to him, he was unrightfully fired.
Yeah, I mean, the classic saying, there's always 3 sides to a story, yours, theirs, and the truth. And there's probably a little bit of his side is true, her side is true, but all I know is that I like Mia Goth's acting. I like her characters that she plays. I think she's really talented.
Mm-hmm.
Just based on that, and that only, which is a tiny worldview of her. If somebody was like, that's what Mia Goth did, I'd be like, and I'm not surprised in the slightest.
Yeah, she has that side to her with the way she chooses roles and the way she portrays herself, I guess, in the public image, that definitely seems a bit unhinged. It wouldn't stand out, and it kind of seems believable. That being said, it's really, we don't know the facts.
No, but there's been so many, times where people got recorded screaming at people on set and stuff. And I wonder if somebody's going to try to record her more often now. I wonder if she's got to be more on her toes or,
She definitely has the momentum right now. 2022, 2023 were kind of insane for her with the amount of movies she starred in.
I don't even know what all she starred in other than Pearl and X and
Yeah, Pearl and X. She had a voice acting role in The House. She played the lead in Infinity Pool. She got cast for the upcoming Blade movie. There's quite a lot going on.
We'll see when that comes out.
Yeah, when and if, and yeah.
we're gonna get the Blade video game before we get the Blade movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks surrounding that. I'll give you that. Yeah. If this is it for Mia Goth, then I'm kind of glad we got the trilogy out of her. and the Brandon Cronenberg movie.
We definitely live in a time, this conversation's going to be prevalent tonight anyways, but I think we live in a time where depending on what you did is how long a person stays
canceled
in canceled blacklist time, in timeout. And I think certain people can use that honestly to their benefit almost, that becomes part of who they are as a character and characters they play. if the shoe fits, she might wear it,
Yeah, that's kind of true. She could still play psychopath and be just more convincing now than ever again. Than
Yeah,
ever before.
exactly.
Yeah.
I guess on the subject of strange actors being strange, our first film is Being John Malkovich, written by Charlie Kaufman, and it is the directorial debut of Spike Jonze. This surreal comedy drama from 1999 follows a puppeteer that finds a portal that leads into the mind of actor John Malkovich. It was praised by Roger Ebert as the best film of that year, and it earned 3 nominations from the Academy. What did you think of this movie?
I wasn't aware of the Roger Ebert praise, and that just made me smile from one year to the other. Yeah, I love Being John Malkovich. I'm a big fan of Charlie Kaufman's writing. I'm a big fan of Spike Jonze directing. I think the whole concept is so wild and out there, and I love that this movie got made, which was in doubt for quite a while. It was a challenge to get this movie made in the first place.
I want to just touch on that for just a second. So this movie was really hard to get made because they really wanted John Malkovich to be the
Yes.
one to do it.
Yeah.
And he wasn't like into it, and they kept asking him, and Charlie Kaufman kept being like, no, man, it has to be John Malkovich. It has to be John Malkovich,
Mhm.
right? And I really respected that idea that he had this character in mind and he really wanted this to be John Malkovich, right?
Yeah.
And then I found out, after I watched this and did a bunch of research on the movie, I found out that the only reason he wanted John Malkovich was because he liked the way the dude's name sounded.
Yeah, the Malkovich scene.
He had no interest in like how he acted or what he looked like or anything about his actual person. He just wanted him to have a funny name. And I'm just like, that's such a dedication to the bit.
I know that interview you're talking about. I think when he says that it's still a slight over exaggeration, I think there's definitely other factors, like the amount of fame of John Malkovich is very specific, a Tom Cruise would be recognizable by way more people than a Malkovich would be. There's a certain image with, theater actor and stuff like that. I think there's probably other reasons as well. But yeah, I love the the idea that this is just because of the Malkovich scene.
It's so funny.
I can actually add onto that. In an interview, John Malkovich talked about how, like, years before it was made, it was sent to him. And initially, when he first read it, he didn't think that much of it, meaning he didn't think it would be about the things that it would be.
Yeah.
He just expected that his name is mentioned there, so he has to clear it. He has had that before. He has cleared like books with his name dropped in there and stuff like that. So he just read it and thought, yeah, someone wants to clear my name so they can move on with this project. And he absolutely fell in love with it from first reading. So much so that he didn't want to really act in it, but he wanted to direct and produce it.
Yeah.
And that's why they wanted to get a different actor. John Malkovich wanted to get a different actor and do it himself. But yeah, Kaufman insisted. And only years later did Francis Ford Coppola, out of all people, call up John Malkovich and was like, hey, you gotta go to Paris, meet this young dude. In a few years, we're all gonna work for him. That was his introduction to Spike Jonze, who at the time was dating Sofia Coppola, the daughter of Francis. So that's how it got to round 2, and he met Spike Jonze, and then we finally got the movie.
Spike Jonze has such a weird back and forth in the industry too, because he's, on these sides of Sofia Coppola and, working with John Malkovich and working with Kaufman and all these people, acting in movies like Babylon and stuff like that. But he's also been in every single Jackass movie.
Yeah, and like he's one of the 2 heads behind Jackass, like one of the original 2 people who pitched Jackass to MTV.
Yeah. That's a duality that I strive for, a
Yeah,
really serious
it's
side and a
incredible.
really bizarre, silly side. I really, really appreciate that about Spike Jonze.
One of a kind, that dude. His origins are in skateboard photography and then videography.
Mm-hmm.
Like his skateboard tapes, I guess, are some of the most influential skateboard videos of all time, probably.
I wonder how many I've seen. I grew up, skateboarding a lot. So I wonder how many of those I've seen.
I found out only via a documentary, like a few years ago, and only then realized that, oh, I have seen Spike Jonze work before I was aware that it was Spike Jonze. I had seen some of those skateboarding videos before.
But I mean, that's only half of the duo here of what makes this movie. Charlie Kaufman. I always want to call him Lloyd Kaufman.
Yeah.
But no, Charlie Kaufman, we can talk about for a minute. I like, as you so well put, Charlie Kaufman's writing. I am not the biggest fan when Charlie Kaufman is behind the camera. I think he's one of those directors that's really benefits from having what's called like the straight man, having a person he can like, here's my ideas, man, here's all the things I came up with, and then the guy behind the camera going, okay, yeah, I'm gonna tone this down like 20%, and this thing doesn't work so well, so I'm gonna do that instead. I think that's perfect for him. I think that's his like best space, is when other people are directing his screenplays. Most people I talk to do not feel that way.
I get the sentiment. Like, I love Kaufman's writing so unapologetically that when he works alone and it is full on Kaufman all the way, I'm still here for it. I can relate to that. Some of his solo work is definitely unhinged. Like, there's no breaks in Synecdoche, New York, and you really gotta be here for it to not get lost.
Well, it's not even that, because I like unhinged things, especially in the case of Synecdoche. Like, it's such a, for me, badly paced movie. That's the kind of stuff that I wish that I like other directors to bring in, is like that they have like a better sense of pacing or a better sense of like sometimes comedic timing, honestly, than he does. But that's not, the point here is that his writing is really good.
Yeah.
and this movie is no exception to that.
In the very same interview that I mentioned already of John Malkovich, he said it is hands down the best screenplay he has ever read in his life. So that's a praise, to be sure.
I mean, I would also say that about a screenplay entirely written about me.
I mean, he always is talking about the thing that he thinks it isn't about him. It is his name and it is his likeliness because he plays it. But that's a character on screen. That's not the actual John Malkovich that he is running around. He was still portraying a character. He was still playing someone else. It's the public persona of John Malkovich, I guess, but it's not John Malkovich really.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Immediately in the opening, I think there's so many great little bits going on, just like great directing choices. Obviously, in the very first moments, we understand the odd occupation of this guy. We see a clear difference between how he sees himself with like the pre-recorded audience applause and the reality of him being alone in this room, Yeah. We instantly see plays on this theme of self and doubt about oneself, with him smashing, or like the puppet smashing the mirror, and then even looking up to the real him in the very next shot. Like looking out of the puppetry theater and looking at the man guiding him. Yeah, there's a lot of little bits instantly in the beginning that tell a lot about the character.
By the way, that was Craig's dance of despair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just want to say real quick that is again later mirrored, right? They filmed the Malkovich part before they filmed the puppet part.
Oh, really?
Yep. I actually found some interviews with the puppeteer. His name's Phil Huber, big puppeteer in the industry, I guess. Not only was he annoyed that they filmed the Malkovich part first, because then he felt like that was inauthentic. That to the movie, you should make up the puppet part first, because that's what came first. So he was annoyed by that. But that the dance was nearly impossible to do with puppets. He had to cheat a bunch of times, and he really didn't like it. And he didn't like that he had to like use camera cuts and stuff. And it bothered him as a puppeteer that he had to like fake it basically to make that dance work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can see how an artist would get annoyed by that. It's kind of funny that of all people, the puppeteer on Being John Malkovich was annoyed with the process.
See, it's funny. He was annoyed a couple times. the upcoming street performance we're going to talk about, he was very unhappy with doing it. He did not like doing that whole thing. He was unhappy that puppets were being used in such a way, and it made him uncomfortable.
Yeah, an artist.
I mean, it's funny because to that guy, this movie was probably about puppeteering and not about all the other stuff.
Yeah. In his mind, this is the big Hollywood representation of his profession.
Exactly. So he wants to get it right, probably, and really, really cares about that, which is fair, fully fair. But yeah, that dance is really interesting. You go straight from that dance to immediately, which is this moment of you seeing him in his power, in his prime, which is, like you said, alone, right? In this dark room, essentially by himself. And the next thing you see is brightness, surrounded by people, and it shows just how little he actually is compared to everything else, doing this little puppet show on the side of the road or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a really, really cool contrast. I couldn't help but to think that in the city of New York, I'm surprised there isn't a bigger market for puppet theater. You think there'd be one place it's like, fuck yeah, we love puppets.
Yeah, true.
Come join our puppet crew. I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird thing. It's a neat choice to have made.
Also, just thematically works so great with this. A lot of this movie focuses on those ideas of getting into someone else's head, performing as someone else. John Malkovich obviously plays a big part in this, and acting as a whole, but also here through the puppetry, one of the things he talks about in first is fantasy and then to the real Maxine, about thinking differently, embodying someone else, really becoming them, feeling like them. It works really great for that, and still is probably the dorkiest version of that you could find, which is perfect for this movie that is so much about serious topics, but also super silly at the same time.
Oh, this movie's incredibly silly. I got a couple things to point out about why this movie is silly.
Something early on that before we move on, wanted to get to. I wrote down a quote that he says to the chimp as he's watching that famous puppeteer do the giant show on the bridge.
Yeah.
All I want to do is my work, but they won't allow it, because I raise issues, is what he says to the monkey. It's here played like a weakness of character of this guy, someone not accepting they have failed and putting all the fault on society. However, looking back at it, seems like a prophecy about Kaufman almost. Like the 3 times nominated Academy Award writer, 1 times winner of the screenwriting Oscar, that legitimately can't get his work funded today. After the financial flop of Synecdoche, New York, in an interview for the crowdfunded Anomalisa, he talked about how he has a finished original musical with 20 original songs that he wrote, where Bill Murray and a bunch of other A-listers were attached to the project, promising to work for basically minimum SAG rate, but they still couldn't find any studios to fund it. And that's still crazy. Mad to this date. That's the state in which Charlie Kaufman is at the moment. And it really, that's such an insane line that in his first movie, one of the first sentences said is, all I want to do is work, but they won't allow it because I raise issues. That's kind of insane.
Yeah, it is a little prophetic of him and a little meta almost of his own situation. Just dialing back to that beginning, so we're still that first theater experience, we're seeing the 2 dolls that he has. It is carved to look like his wife. And he looks like him. I don't have any proof of this, but I would bet money on it that literally the wig that John Cusack is wearing, that they took a piece of that and just glued it to the doll. It looks like it's supposed to be his real hair. He cut his hair and attached to the doll. It's the same texture. It's because he's got really distinctly dry hair. Do you know what I mean? It's not well kept. It's everywhere all the time. Which I just want to brings me to his wife, also very, messy, not kept or whatever. I got over halfway through this movie before I realized that it was
Cameron Diaz.
Cameron Diaz. Yeah, thank you. I was like, what? It was like she had to get like wet in the rain or something. Her hair had to change completely, and I was like, what the fuck?
Mhm.
And when I looked it up, it said that the first day they were on set and she came out dressed up, that the cast and other bits of crew tried to escort her off because they thought she was somebody else.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
My God. Yeah.
So I'm glad I wasn't the only one.
Yeah, no, I absolutely had that experience the first time watching it. The moment I saw her, I knew I know that person, but I just couldn't match it. My mind was absolutely confused looking at the face and knowing that I recognize it, but I would have never thought that it was Cameron Diaz. I had to look it up here.
Yeah, I think she honestly deserves a lot more praise in this film
Yeah,
than I think she was ever really given.
it's a career best to me, for sure.
Yeah. Everybody in this movie does pretty well, but a lot of these people play like versions of themselves almost, either literally or just John Cusack being one note John Cusack.
Yeah. There's one interesting bit where a lot of Kaufman's filmography has this dreamlike nature to it that reminded a lot of people of Fellini's classic 8.5. And here's this particularly weird thing happening in Malkovich where almost all of the weirdness happens on the floor 7.5. So people were set in stone that, yeah, this has to be a reference of the movie 8.5 by Fellini. But Kaufman to this day denied it and regularly says that he has never even seen that movie. And I believe it, but it's an insanely perfect coincidence.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I've only seen one Fellini and I hated it. So I don't know if I'll be catching that one. I saw it as Satyr Icon.
Yeah, I have only seen 8.5 and I loved 8.5. I will
man.
watch more Fellini at some point.
Did not enjoy it. The whole idea that they're on this little floor, right, is really funny because I think everybody's first thing as you're watching this is after a few moments you wonder and you think is like, was it designed for like little people? Was that the idea? Like what why is it like this?
Mhm.
And then they immediately like in a really, really rude way are like, yes, that's exactly what they made this room for. It's so stupid.
Yeah, it's hilariously dumb. I remember watching it the first time around. I also had this moment of no fucking way are they gonna do that when he first finds the portal. Because I just thought, okay, now we're getting a 7.25 floor. Because it's again another smaller door within the smaller room.
Oh my God, that's really funny. You thought it was just gonna be another smaller room.
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be split in half again.
It's really funny, actually. Oh my God, it's like Willy Wonka almost, just going just smaller and smaller and smaller doors.
Yeah. I have something actually about the portal. When he
Yeah.
first goes in, there's this bit about the plank he has with him.
Yeah, where did
And
the wood
he
go?
loses that wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote down the quote, I had a piece of wood with me. Where is it now? Is it still in Malkovich's head? I wondered this time around if that's a sexual innuendo, because he specifically says, where is the wood now? This wouldn't be the only time something like sexuality comes up within this context.
Yeah.
The tunnel in the screenplay is described as vaginal, even though Spike Jonze made more of an anal thing out of it.
An anal thing? It's because it's like a dirt tunnel?
Yeah, I mean, that's literally how Charlie Kaufman described it in an interview, that he was kind of disappointed that Spike Jonze made his vaginal idea and made it into an anal tunnel.
It's still mentioned later, though. It's brought up. It's honored.
Yeah. She mentions it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lottie starts questioning her gender after the experience in the male
Mhm.
body. There's the whole having sex with two people at once as a power play out of Maxine's perspective. So yeah, I just wondered if the word would remaining in the head of Malkovich was part of this whole idea. But I'm not too certain about it, to be honest, because when he leaves Malkovich the final time so that his boss and all of those people can enter at the 44th birthday or whatever the date is.
Yeah.
if it was meant as like, okay, the wood is in his mind now, so now all the sexual stuff is happening. That would kind of imply that in the moment that it leaves, the sexuality leaves, but it doesn't really. We see later on that that the boss made his dream come true and married the lady with the hearing impairment.
Yes. His speech impediment,
Yeah,
his gaslit speech impediment.
Yeah, that's such an amazing joke. My God,
It's so
I
dumb.
love that.
I didn't notice the wood comes back out. That's really funny. It's a great catch.
Yeah, he falls down from the skies with the wood when he leaves the last time.
I wanna move back in story a little bit. Right before he finds the portal, he asks Maxine out on like a date, like to go have a drink or whatever, and she goes to the bar with him. Not only is Maxine a terrible human being.
Oh yeah.
Oh
sure.
my God, she's such a terrible human being. I was really mad that as soon as he finds the portal, the first thing he does is goes and tells her. It's so interesting that this character who's really into like expressing humanity and expressing feelings and all these things like that can't read a person well enough to know that they hate you.
Yeah. Because he really is emotionally blind towards her.
He's emotionally blind to everything.
Yeah, true. That's a more accurate way to put it,
Yeah. He's literally just emotionally blind. And it's so weird. I wonder, there might be something about him, not understanding emotions to the point where he doesn't know how to deal with them himself of his own.
That would kind of make sense, since I've watched, I think, everything that Charlie Kaufman has written that has been put to screen. To a degree, I think the main character is a Charlie Kaufman self-insert. You can see that particularly in adaptation where, it's very obvious written out of the perspective of Charlie Kaufman. So, you get the context of him as a character. It's fascinating to see how he at the same time has a great understanding of human emotions and of human interactions. Like that comes through his writing. He obviously understands that on paper, but he lacks the capacity to really make use of that in his own life. It reflects that the puppeteer here obviously has to understand human emotions and human movement and all of that in order to perform, to do his work. But at the same time, he can't really apply that to his own life.
That's interesting, yeah. I keep forgetting the wife's name.
Lottie.
Yeah, that's one thing. I don't know if that's outdated or not either. It's just her. I don't know. What does that say? That she wasn't in a place, it looked like, where she was thinking about her gender identity, and then that caused her to like suddenly want to all the way move
Question
over.
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I'm not questioning it even. I can understand why you'd be questioning it if you suddenly were in the body of another person. And not just the body of another person. Her first whole interaction of being in his body is him drying his own naked body off and her feeling all of that. So her first and only at first interaction with another person is not quite sexual in nature, but has to do with the physical gender.
Yeah.
It is a weird thing. Their whole weird love, not trifecta, square, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine that could evoke some suppressed emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it aged poorly or anything. I think it's a very interesting observation. Like, that's one of the main things that I love about Kaufman's writing, is that he, in almost a Pixar-esque way, he gets one weird idea and says, okay, if that idea is the reality, to what other things would that lead? And then just walks you through a bunch of scenarios of results that would lead to. And I think that is just a kind of logical consequence, that there's a chance that someone might go in there and all of a sudden experience something that they didn't know they wanted all of their lives. I have something on Lottie entering Malkovich the second time.
Please do,
That's the one where Maxine calls and he dictates a piece to himself as Maxine calls. I checked it. It's The Cherry Orchid by Anton Chekhov. And yes, that's the Chekhov with Chekhov's gun. Literally that Russian dude. It was his last piece he wrote. And I tried to find connections from the story of the Cherry Orchid and the themes here, but couldn't really. But I found one thing that is somewhat interesting. It was written as a comedy, but when it was adapted to the stage, more often than not, it was adapted as a straightforward drama, much to the dislike of Chekhov, who still experienced the first adaptations. I wonder if that during the year-long process of getting this movie made was ever an issue. I can definitely see a chance where a team of producers were like, yeah, that's all cool and all of the questioning the self works, but this is way too ridiculous. We gotta tone it down. We gotta make it less funny, make it more serious or something like that. Because I can definitely see how producers look at a script like that and would give notes like that. So yeah, I assume that's the connection and that maybe that's the reason why he specifically made John Malkovich read the Cherry Orchid.
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't know about Chekhov in general. That's super cool.
I love all the little foreshadowing. Like there's the parrot saying she's locking me into a cage in the beginning. They bring up the chimp childhood trauma super early on, which comes back within that cage scene.
Okay, but that is some silly shit. Okay, we were talking about like this movie gets a little bit silly, right? That is one. Okay, that I'm gonna mark that real fast. That is the first of the like really, really, really silly moments in this movie. Is suddenly cutting away to like this chimp's like memories and stuff of it,
the childhood trauma,
and it like having the name Elijah, like that's its chimp given name, like its parents called it Elijah in the wilderness too, and like he's got like PTSD from knots. It's all the way it's filmed. It's so campy. I love it. It's absolutely ridiculous. Keep going.
That's all I had on that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It is ridiculous, but I love how serious it takes itself at the same time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a cutaway joke, Family Guy-esque, because it could have worked just for that if no one brought it up earlier, and then we have that scene with them in the cage, and all of a sudden you cut away to that flashback. It would have been all the context needed, really, for the scene to work. But they went out of their way to establish early on that she's going to a therapist, that there's some childhood trauma that they have to work through together. That's all of extra steps that aren't really needed, but really enhance the thing and takes it serious, even though it's a super silly thing.
Second silly moment in this movie for me that comes up that just strikes it home for me is Lottie finding out that Dr. Lester runs like a cult of octogenarian soul body hopping people, and it is right out of like a Pulp Fiction culty movie, and I love it. It is so B horror movie. This movie does a couple of these. Like I said, like the first one is very weird comedy, offbeat, with the monkey. This one is almost like an old horror movie, kind of like ridiculous thing. And then the third one's gonna be it's gonna be almost like a ridiculous, campy sci-fi moment. I really love how nice Dr. Lester is to Lottie and stuff. And then he's like, I'm going to offer you a part in the body. And it's just like, yeah, it's such a cult moment, like the cult of Malkovich. I do think it's interesting that it seems to be only people in Malkovich's line. He mentions at one point about Malkovich, like somebody having her baby. And it's like, that's the son of the seed or whatever. Like, I don't know. Yeah. It seems like it's important that it's in the line of Malkovich's family.
Yeah, which implies that his boss is the dad of John Malkovich.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even think about that.
That's one I caught this time around. I was like, oh, wait, that means he has to be the dad.
That's different. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, he does finally manage to become Malkovich, and I was really surprised that the time skip they take. It's only 6 months. It feels like a lot longer because of how badly he managed to get a hairstyle. Yeah. God, just there's a reason why he shaved it off. I love that the actor himself too was like, yeah, let's do that. That's great. That's what I would look like with a ponytail. But I was like kind of surprised that time skip, that there's so much not there. You know, I feel like there's so much that could be fit there that would have happened. It's weird that they jumped the time to me.
I think it makes sense to me because the one really interesting part about that is seeing that Craig is kind of responsible for his own flaws. You know, how it's not that he needed the fame, that he needed the money, and all of a sudden his problems go away. He's still getting fat. His hair looks still as awful. He's still not taking care of himself. And his relationships are still shit, you know. There's really nothing he can brush that off to. And it shows that just a few months within that new setting, within that new body, within that new relationship, everything's back to normal.
Except one thing, and that's in that documentary he's watching, is they make the point that when he decided to switch to being a puppeteer, that he had to start from the ground up again. Mm-hmm. And it shows him like doing puppeteer stuff in like clubs and stuff. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they have those clips of oh man, I don't remember what actor it was. And he was like, I think we're all going to be doing
Sean Penn, yeah.
Yeah, Sean Penn. I think we're all going to be doing puppeteering in the next few years or whatever like that, right?
That's so funny, that bit.
But that shows that it wasn't that he was John Malkovich. It was that his puppeteering was that good. Yeah. So he had this in him all the time. He really could have done this. You know what he should have done was try to play gigs at shows and not play him on the side of the fucking road.
Yeah. Within that context of just the profession, I guess, it really seemed to have been a lack of confidence all along. And a lack of drive, possibly. But within all of the other problems, it really wasn't. Since we're already at the Sean Penn thing, within that same sequence, the fake documentary, I love the David Fincher cameo. I don't know if you know how David Fincher looks, but he is in there.
Yeah, but I do know, but what was he playing?
He's called Kristoffer Borgli. And he says the line, Malkovich shows us a reflection of ourselves, which I think is a lovely little line to drop. And to me is one of the ideas possibly of this movie, or how I look at this movie, is that in your life you have kind of these different masks and characters you almost play in like a work setting and friend setting. You always behave a little different. You talk a little different, you wear different clothes. Mm-hmm. This movie really embodies that to me. Like Lottie says early on, it's almost like he has a female side to himself. When Maxine talks about having sex with these two people at once, she also talks about through Lottie, she saw Malkovich's female side in his eyes. So I think this movie really has like some interesting ideas of how this is kind of representative of the different sides and different persons one might show in different settings towards different people.
I hope to never see myself in anything these characters. These are all terrible humans. All these characters are terrible, terrible people. I love this movie, but they're terrible people. We move to the climax of the movie, getting him out of there, stealing Lottie, all that stuff. It's a little rushed, I think, toward the end of the movie. It kind of all falls really fast, but it might be kind of the idea.
I liked it. I like the pacing in the end.
I like it in a way. I like the very last moment of this movie. And that's my third moment of this movie being cheesy. That is like an old sci-fi. It's almost like a Twilight episode, a Twilight Zone episode, or like The Outer Limits or something. He's like now stuck in the little kid's body or whatever forever. That's so campy. That is so, do 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 do. Should have been playing over the back while that was ending. I loved that. I really loved that. That's the final mark of this movie, is we're going to go out on like really cheesy 1950s, like, oh, and that made me happy.
Yeah, I understand why. I have some behind the scenes stuff in the chase sequence of Lottie and Maxine through the subconscious of Malkovich.
Yeah.
Which amazing sequence. Like the way it is shot and the cinematography in that is incredible. there's this moment where Maxine kind of stumbles down the stairs. When they actually filmed that, that was luckily one of the last things they filmed because Cathrin Keener broke her leg. But they had to get another take. They couldn't use that take where she broke her leg. She didn't like go all the way down the stairs. So what they did, and what you see in the actual movie, is that Spike Jonze was dressed up as the Cathrin Keener character. Makeup and bodysuit and everything.
That's amazing.
And he is the one falling down the stairs. That's actually the director, Spike Jonze, dressed up as Cathrin Keener.
That's amazing.
It looked wild in the behind the scenes. I guess my final little bit of this is that the Criterion edition of this film is the most unhinged Criterion edition of all fucking time, I tell you. Very fittingly to what the movie is. Where do we start? The Blu-ray cover itself has on the flip side a Rorschach test.
Very cool.
And I don't know if it's like the same one on every print or if they're alternated, but I could see that. The behind the scenes documentary features a lot of complaining about how miserable it is to shoot in the 7.5 set. Charlie Kaufman, that shows up for like 3 seconds on set, is super embarrassed, avoids the camera at all costs, and basically refuses to answer anything. There's a booklet featuring a conversation between Spike Jonze with a critic that seems like almost a parody of critic-director conversations. Like, it's so unhinged. The critic asks longer and longer questions, to which Spike replies less and less, just gets annoyed and angry, and at some point doesn't even answer anymore, whilst the critic basically explains what the movie means to him. And here's the final bit, and that's the craziest one probably. If you Google what's the weirdest commentary track or something like that, you will most likely end up with the commentary track for Being John Malkovich. It was not recorded by Charlie Kaufman, not recorded by Spike Jonze either. It was recorded by Michel Gondry. A little bit of backstory. Michel Gondry, Kaufman, and Jonze were 3 good friends at the time. Both Gondry and Jonze ended up, directing the early Kaufman scripts, with Jonze doing adaptation and Being John Malkovich, and Gondry doing Human Nature,
Eternal Sunshine,
and then Eternal Sunshine. Exactly. Eternal Sunshine wasn't out by the time this Criterion was made, just to have that context. And Human Nature, the first one Gondry did for Kaufman, is probably Kaufman's weakest script and like got the weakest reception, was a flop at the box office, etc. Whilst the first 2 Spike did for Kaufman were both Oscar-nominated, prestigious, successful movies. So there was a lot of conflict between Gondry and Jonze, and within that power dynamic, within that group. Yeah, the commentary track is only 50 minutes long. It starts off with a warning that Criterion and their associates do not, that this commentary track does not represent their opinions.
Oh no.
It is edited down because supposedly the rest was just too unhinged and couldn't be shown to the public. I'm not sure if he's sober whilst recording it. For the most part, he makes fun of the movie, has barely anything to add, asks questions like, why am I even recording this right now? it's so crazy. He's
That
really
sounds like an amazing commentary to listen to.
Yeah, he's really bitter about everything. It's absolutely bonkers. I can't believe that Criterion allowed that, and I have to wonder if that's maybe the reason that this is the only film by either Kaufman or Spike Jonze in the Criterion collection. They never got another one in. Even though they have so many amazing movies, I have to wonder if Criterion just got the results for this Criterion and they were like, he's basically making fun of it. The whole Criterion edition feels like it's a parody of a Criterion edition. it's wild. It's batshit crazy.
That's cool, though. I mean, I love really unconventional commentary tracks in the first place. So I would maybe be even willing to give that a listen too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can highly advise it everyone to check it out. It is one of my favorite Criterion editions, hands down. Moving on to Dream Scenario. Dream Scenario is the new film by Norwegian director Kristoffer Borgli. It follows Nick Cage as Paul Matthews, who goes from being a university professor to being a viral sensation after showing up in dreams of people all around the world. After initially enjoying the attention, he quickly runs into problems as he discovers that his public persona grows a mind on its own, derailing his life further and further.
I just want to say right out the gate here, I went into this fairly blind. I knew about the guy being in people's dreams.
Mm-hmm.
I did not see the viral cancel culture aspect of this movie coming at all. I did not have any idea that this is what this movie was going to be about, even in the slightest.
Kind of interesting and fitting that we already talked about potentially Mia Goth being cancelled. So
that's why when you mentioned it, I was like, oh, that fits really great. That's perfect. This movie has a lot of things that I really love about it. Some movies take a long time to get somewhere, not because they're really trying to tell a story, but because they want to cater to you making sure you get their point or get what's happening, or they want to make sure you don't miss things. This movie does not give a fuck about that. This movie is from the gates moving at like 60 miles an hour. This movie's very fast, and I really appreciate that because it doesn't really care if you miss something. It's going to keep moving over. And it does it, I think, in a really good way. It's really easy to mess that pace up. But I really appreciated the way they handled it.
It's very efficient. We instantly start off with a dream.
Yes.
With the dream of the daughter. And even if the characters don't know the full significance of that yet, they already try to question, okay, what does it mean that he doesn't interact? What does maybe his daughter think of? Because, obviously they don't know that he's already showing up all around the world in dreams at that point. I love how it portrays it visually, like the way we move with those flickering images from the opening credits into that dream. Works fantastically. Just a few minutes into the movie, we have that lecture he gives at the university, not only showing what his job is, but instantly within that lecture, we get a lot of the themes of the movie. He talks about the zebras and how their cameo isn't really to blend in within the nature, but within the herd, and that only someone sticking out of the herd is really the one in danger. It's a perfect, little play on the fact that he is supposed to be the everyman. He is someone that isn't remarkable in any way whatsoever, and that's kind of a perfect choice as the one person who then goes on to become the most famous person in the world, basically, for a moment.
Yeah, and that's also interesting because he, is dressed in a very everyman, kind of very bland way, yet he somehow, I think the big jacket adds a lot to his character visually. But he's often really stands out visually in any scene he's standing around with a group of people. He's like a sore thumb every time. So it's interesting that, again, he's, the most normal basic thing.
But still sticks out in a way.
Yeah, it still sticks out. You're talking about the way the movie flows in the beginning, film-wise, the cinematography. This movie does L cuts quite a lot. And I really love that. I love an L cut. For the people who don't know, an L cut is a editing technique in which your scene has audio and an image, and then the scene changes in the video, and the images are now something else, but the audio that was happening previously still keeps going. So, a lot of times in this movie, they're talking about a dream or something like that, and the person is still talking as it shifts into the dream scenario. Ah, look, I did that. It was all totally on accident. I love that. I don't really know what it's called when they cut it. Like a J cut is the opposite, but they don't. They like basket these almost sometimes. It's like they cut into an L cut and then they stop at the end in a very strange way, a very abrupt way. I don't know. I really loved a lot of the editing of this movie. I think is really well done. It's very generic type editing, but it's very not subtle. Nothing about this movie, I think, is very subtle, actually.
Did you pick up on the 180 rule breaks they did in the dialogue scenes? Apparently not.
No,
Oh.
I'm just thinking about it. I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, you are not wrong. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
That's interesting. No, I never noticed that. I've always thought that's kind of a crap rule. But because I didn't notice. But yeah, no, go on. Tell me more about them.
So for people real quick, the 180 rule is basically when you cut dialogue, or I think it's even way more important in an action scene, but here it applies to dialogue scenes. You have those over-the-shoulder shots where you have the shoulder of one character in the foreground on, let's say, the right-hand side, and you look into the face of another character on the left-hand side. And then you cut to the other side, having that character's shoulder again on the left-hand side, and then seeing the other person on the right-hand side. The characters each have their own half of the screen, basically, and by that you have continuity, and it's easy to follow what's happening, because even though they are not on the very same position in the frame, they are still somewhat in the same area. And it's called 180 rule because you can imagine this imaginary line of 180 degrees. Within that line, the camera can move around. If you go to all the way on the other side of the table, basically, when they are talking, then you would break the 180 rule, and all of a sudden the characters would be switched within the frame. Here the movie does that a lot. In particular, I noticed within the scene when they are finally invited to the dinner party, there's several moments where it's very meticulously crafted 180 rule breaks, and I'm not entirely sure what it meant. They cut basically exactly 180 degrees to the other side. The camera just switches position, and all of a sudden the other person is exactly in like millimeter precise where the last person that talked just was in the screen. Everyone is fighting for attention within the screen, and it's a bit jarring, but it's very interesting, and I wish I had more to say on why it happens or what I think it meant, but I would need to watch that dialogue again and see what really happened there.
Absolutely, I'd love to see the dialogue. I mean, I've seen a moment like that in a movie where it was like a line of people speaking to one person, and the camera flipped back and forth to make sure that the person in the line was always on the right side of the screen, and or then the left or whatever, right, left or whatever, back and forth, to like kind of show like a power struggle. So whoever was on the right side of the screen was the person was more in power in the conversation at that moment, right?
Yeah, and there's use cases in dialogues where they are, like, for the most part, sticking to the same side, and then at some point, I don't know, information comes up within the dialogue that changes the power dynamic, and all of a sudden you have one single switch of the rule.
Yeah.
All of a sudden they change sides, but then they stick to those again. Something like that happens all the time and makes sense to me. Here it was odd. Here they just almost constantly flip, and it's a constant struggle, and I'm not exactly sure what the struggle it wanted to portray with that.
Well, so I mean, even as saying maybe they're, ignoring the deeper meaning of the thing, right? And more just on an artistic form of filming a movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
The 180 rule does generally exist for action. That's kind of the idea, right? And it's because quick cuts of action, your brain needs like a reference point. So if you flip the screen around a lot, those quick cuts you're like, wait, which direction did that just come from? And you have to like kind of piece together the world around your head. So when you're not doing action and you're just looking at a room of two people talking, right? You should be able to look at the room and, map it in your head a little bit to the point where if it screen switches, you're not confused about why are they now in different spots? Like it's just the other side of the room, right? It's pretty basic stuff. I think by exploring the room more when you're filming, you are respecting the audience's intelligence more and knowing that they can get that and they don't need a stupid 180 rule to herd their viewing. You know what I mean? I think it just allows more artistic flexibility in how you want to have different shots, put people in maybe the right side of the camera or the left side of the camera to show, like you said, the power dynamic changes. I think it's just a great way to explore the room in general in film that doesn't get done enough. And like I said, this movie's not very subtle. And a lot of times not subtle things are seen as like, dumbed down or something. And I don't think this movie is dumbed down at all, despite how subtle it is.
No.
So that kind of, for me, that kind of like enforces that it's trying to respect the intelligence of people and go, no, you are smart. You can look at this room and figure out which side the person is fucking on.
I get that sentiment. I still don't believe that's fully it. First of all, there are some pretty quick cuts even within that dialogue. There were definitely moments where I noticed it stood out like a zebra out of the herd. It stood out to me. And it was confusing, not as in, I don't know what's happening right now, but it was a moment of oddness. And I think maybe it is just that, because in that dialogue scene, even though we don't know yet, it's super irritating to the wife, the host, because she's one of the people having those nightmare dreams about him killing her.
Oh, yeah. Maybe
it is just part of getting the audience as irritated with this dinner as the wife. One of those tricks to use on the audience to get them irritated.
True. Before we move too far into the film, really early on, as you mentioned, it seems like people are probably already having these dreams by the time we're catching up with Paul in general.
There's a lot of hints pointing at it. Yeah,
I really like the representation of a man not connected to the internet, really. You see that a lot in movies and stuff, but in this way, where normally you would see the contrast of the real world to the man not connected and how, narrow his view is compared to seeing everything, right? You are experiencing this in a narrow way because he's experiencing it in a narrow way. I really like that. Like you said, there's hints at it, and you kind of realize later, like, oh, this has been going on a while. You realize it about the same time he realizes it, and that's really well done. It could have been really easy to show how much it was happening around him, But I really liked that. I really liked that you kind of are on that same journey with him.
For the story, it's a great idea to have this person who has basically no understanding of how the internet really works and how internet culture works. Have this person kind of become a meme and go viral is perfect. There's so much conflict embedded within that concept. It's great.
Well, that and the entire thing that he's trying to write a story about like a shared ant-telligence, and he's almost having the experience of it around him, but he doesn't make that connection in any way.
Yeah.
A small thing that I really enjoyed in this movie that was really early on that it's just fuck this. It got me so good. It got me so good. And it's such a small moment is when Paul opens the door to the dean's office and he's like, have you been having dreams about me? And the dean's like, what are you talking about? Tim Meadows is the dean there, and he's just fantastic in everything he's in. He stands there for a second and he kind of stares at the wall and he goes, all right. And he leaves the room. And the dean just sits there for a second and is like, what? And looks at the spot that he was staring at and is like, what the fuck was he looking at kind of moment, and kind of trips out a little bit. And that's such a human type of comedy that is so, in its own way, mimetic. It is something we all experience. It is literally a meme. That joke was a meme of human interaction. And I think that was fucking amazing. I love that they did that.
I didn't pick up on it that much that it's kind of representative of a meme, but yeah, you're absolutely right, yeah.
And it's such a funny joke. It's such a small and just such a relatable joke. You've ever been talking to somebody and they're just looking a little to your left and you have to stop and be like, what's behind me? What are you looking at, man? You're freaking me out.
You already brought it up a bit with the ant thing.
Yeah, intelligence.
I love how they kind of touch on the idea of evolution within this, with his job and with the zebras and stuff like that. because it kind of fits into the way memes work, where the original creator of a meme barely at some point has any influence on how that piece of art or piece of media gets used again and again and gets represented and how it evolves. There's a lot to that is like evolution, and how I can only think right now of the documentary Feels Good Man about the Pepe meme. And yeah, there's a lot of parallels to how the original artist behind Pepe basically lost all power and control over this little frog, and how it gets misused by the alt-right and turned into a hate symbol, basically. And the way Nick Cage's public persona kind of gets taken from him and gets turned into this symbol of horror, and how all of that backlash really reflects back on him, despite him never trying to make it that,
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because he, in Feels Good Man, at least, in that real story, that person is at least trying to put an art out there for the world to see, and that art was picked up and misused. So this is almost more interesting, and it's like one of those like memes. It's like a picture of a kid or something, where this kid wasn't trying to be a meme. He wasn't trying to put himself on the internet. Just somebody picked it up.
I think even more accurate representation or comparison would be the story of the Hide the Pain Herald, that Hungarian guy that made the stock photos.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a great example.
And how he kind of became famous, and he never wanted this. He never wanted to become famous, but at this point, I think he's fine with it. Has come around and embraces it, I think.
And yeah, I mean, and this guy is, he's literally living in the whole thing as a meme. Every time somebody sees him in their dreams, they're putting their unique spin on him, and that carries over because they talk to people about it and stuff. I can see where a lot of people probably had a problem with not the ending of this movie, but with the revelation of, are these people spreading this thing and making this happen? And it's just kind of like people lying or not lying, or just kind of misinformationing about these dreams,
Mm-hmm.
I think some people probably were upset with the way they end up playing that out, but I liked that it really was these people all having these dreams and all having those like representations of it and really creating it over and over and over and over again. And that made me wonder too, actually, a little bit on like how much did the influence of each person have on the next person in their dreams, right? And how much influence did he have? Because it's also foreshadowed a little bit that he is so upset that he's not doing anything in these dreams, and he just wants so much at least to be doing something in them, and then he does, and people fucking hate him for it. So it makes me wonder how much of that like is influenced, or if that's just like the natural progression of this weird dream situation.
Kristoffer Borgli actually talked about that in a Collider interview.
Okay.
Like one of the core ideas, or I guess two of the core ideas that overlap for this when writing it, was some Jungian philosophical theories. So the one would be this idea of that some part of our consciousness is universal, that we have a shared consciousness on some sort of level, all of humanity. And another concept of Jungian philosophy is this idea that all your baggage that you don't work through, so like negative emotions that just build up and you compartmentalize, will manifest in your subconscious and therefore in your dreams. So he had this idea of, what if both of those are true, and this guy just has built up so much baggage and so many negative emotions that he never worked through in his life, that kind of the universal consciousness picks up on it, and everyone starts having those dreams and manifestations of his baggage, basically, because just his own consciousness couldn't handle it anymore. With that in mind, it's definitely that his actions have influence on the dream versions of himself. And you can kind of see that.
Before you say it, excuse me, I want to say I agree with that, because that almost empowers my idea that his like desire to do things in the dreams pushed it, because he had mentioned that a bunch of times, and the only people that he had ever heard him mention that really was his family. And the first person that we see have a dream where he actually does something is his daughter.
Really?
Yep, that's the first person where like he actually, because she's scared of him. That's the first
Is
time
that
we
the
see like,
first
oh, she
time
had a
we
shit.
see that? I think
That's the first time you see the
isn't
nightmare.
the sex dream of the assistant first? I thought so.
I don't think so.
At least
I
the
could be
way
wrong.
I wrote it down was that, at least my theory of how it plays out. First of all, you have all of that baggage that doesn't know where to go, so it ends up in the dreams of the subconscious, of the universal subconscious. With him getting famous due to that, his ego kind of blows up, and therefore some people start getting a version of his subconscious in the dreams that is this big ego guy, which results in the sex dream. He engages in like possible self-destructive behavior by having that affair and morally questionable behavior, and therefore the dreams then get destructive. And once he kind of realizes that his actions have consequences after hurting that teacher, and kind of takes consequences as in we see him move out, he knows that his relationship doesn't work anymore. In a way, he's working through his baggage, and then the dreams stop for the general people. So that was my kind of plot by plot point of what I think happens.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely was more, on the side of at least that, like, he had influenced that he wanted to do more. His daughter was already having kind of nightmares where he just wasn't doing anything. So now that pushes him to being the reason this happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then she probably talked to people, or maybe somebody else concurrently also had started having a nightmare or whatever, right? Those people start sharing those ideas. They start talking about that, and that starts to spread. Especially if you're talking about, like, in the reality of this movie, that in this movie, the shared subconsciousness is a reality. This is not like an idea. It's like a thing that's actually happening to these people, right? So the idea that enough people start talking to each other about having nightmares would influence the shared consciousness more too, right?
Yeah.
And that would cause them all to start having more nightmares. So it's almost like, this movie mirrors so much cancel culture type stuff. You see things on, how do I put this? Right now on TikTok, there's a woman named Kala, and she is digging a tunnel under her house. They call her Tunnel Girl. And she's making this huge, like, mine shaft big tunnel system under her home. And there's been a lot of words of like, is this legal? Are her neighbors pissed? Whatever, blah, blah, blah. She ended up getting shut down. And during her time of being shut down, an investigative reporter, I guess, or whatever, went in and found out that she's like a Trump supporter and she's kind of against all these things and she's not like a great person and stuff. And this is one person just was word about this. And in the like 3 weeks since this happened, the entire internet has totally changed their feelings about Tunnel Girl, and now they don't like her. She hasn't gotten to respond to about it. She hasn't said anything about it. I'm not saying these things aren't true. What I'm saying is that it doesn't take much for somebody to whisper, like one person to start saying a couple things for that to spread so fast and everybody to accept it as a truth, right? And in this same instance in this movie, I feel like the subconscious is working the same way with the dreams. One person says to their friend, he creeps me out. He really creeps me out. And the other one says, oh yeah, me too, a little bit. And then that night, 5 more people have a nightmare because it's spreading. Even though people know he's not, even though people who know him don't, and they know he's not creepy. They're so influenced by this dream, this thing that is not factual.
Yeah. There's this moment where after he himself has one of those dreams, he makes that awful apology video, kind of framing himself as the victim. And
yeah,
it's not only is that a very real thing that happened before on the internet, and I was almost surprised he didn't bring out the ukulele or something.
I was literally about to say it's like the ukulele. It's literally the ukulele one. I forgot what that was called. Who did that? But that was so bad.
It's Lily Sings or something.
Miranda Sings.
Miranda
Sings. Oh God, she's terrible. Anyways, yeah.
But at the same time, the things he said are true in that. That was the really interesting conflicting part about it for me, because yes, the way he frames himself and everything is super cringy, and it just obviously shows a lack of understanding of the internet that he puts that out there and isn't aware that it's gonna result in a backlash. But that being said, it's tough to really be angry at him in that moment, because the things he says are true. Like, this anger towards him is the result of people seeing an imaginary version of him do bad things, but that's not really him, not a really accurate representation of him. Unless we fully believe in that Jungian theory of it's all just a result of his baggage, I guess. But even then, it's a kind of indirect result, and he didn't ask for anyone else to have dreams about his baggage,
He's like a dream punching bag. He's like a thing that they can all use to work through these issues in their dreams, and they come out of these dreams just mad at him about it.
Yeah.
To bring this movie a little bit back into like the actual things that happened in the movie, talking about the lack of subtlety in this movie, he gets to the place where he's going to get represented. Essentially, they're like his agents, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love the shot of him sitting in front of the sign that just says thoughts, 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 thoughts over and over again. That is the least subtle fucking imagery I've seen in a movie in a really long time. Just right there, literally flashing lights. That's my type of imagery. That's my type of like symbolism in movies. Is you could make a frame of that as a picture and you would understand everything that you're seeing in that picture. I thought that was a fantastic shot. Probably my favorite shot in the whole film.
There's a really interesting mixture of filmmaking techniques within this film. On the one hand, this is very academic filmmaking, I'd say. Like the things shown, particularly in the first 2/3, I'd say, in the movie, they are very precise. There's not a lot of camera movement. It's framed well. It's the way they teach you how to frame and film shots in film school, I guess. Very academic filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, even within those parts, the lack of subtlety and the kind of cheekiness of it all feels super young and fresh despite it feeling academic. And it's a kind of odd mixture that I really love. And by the end of it, you also get a totally different style of filmmaking that is way more emotionally driven. In the end, there's a lot of handheld filmmaking. The camera is way closer. You have longer lenses. It's dreamier. There's a lot of shallow depth of field, so like a lot of blurry background. Particularly, an example would be before he visits France in the end and he drops off his kid and talks to the mother. And you have that daydream sequence where they hug and he imagines how beautiful it would be. And that's really almost shot like a Lars von Trier movie at that point, where it's 100% handheld. There's a lot of seemingly spontaneous camera movement. There's jump cuts. It really feels like what Lars von Trier calls emotional editing. And that's such a contrary philosophy of filmmaking to the academic filmmaking you have at the beginning. But it absolutely works because now he's finally in an emotional place. It makes sense that the filmmaking would also be different. And that's, beautiful. I have never seen it done in that kind of combination, and that absolutely works.
Well, is where we have all these moments where, like I said, in the beginning, you have all these L cuts and these J cuts, where the audio proceeds or it follows through with the video, right? In those scenes and leading up, actually, I think the first one is a dream that it happens in. We have a cut that I don't know the name of it. I don't know what you call it, where essentially before that scene's imagery ends, the audio cuts out. The next scene plays completely silent. The third bit of the scene comes in with no audio, and the audio comes in halfway through it. And that's kind of what they did with some of the cuts at the, like you said, the saying goodbye. that whole moment when they, they're back and they're young again, it's all silent in that moment or whatever. It cuts all the audio out there. And I don't know what you call that, but that's an interesting shot. That's a really interesting way to do that. And it's different than everything else the movie's doing.
Mm-hmm. But it doesn't stick out like a Thor thumb or anything. It all works together. It somehow manages to juggle these different influences and ways of filmmaking and makes it into one cohesive thing.
That kind of leads us back into the plot a little more, but that's way long time ago. That was when he meets the reporter lady and goes home with the reporter lady. I hated that. I hated all of that.
It's a super uncomfortable scene, yeah.
It's uncomfortable, and it's just it just don't. I liked it. It adds to the movie well, but you know what I mean. It's a hard watch.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think I really have only one more other note, and I don't even remember where it is in the movie that it says this anywhere. I wish I would have wrote more down. All I have written here is, "Come, fart, cry is my new live, laugh, love." I don't even remember where that's written in the movie, "Come, fart, cry," but I fucking love it.
It's not written. It is that very scene when he has that affair, I guess, with the assistant girl, and they are sitting on the couch. It's the reality of it all.
Yeah, he comes, he farts, he cries. Yeah, immediately in that trifecta. Yeah, "Come, fart, cry" is my new live, laugh, love for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I'd rather put that on my kitchen wall than live, laugh, love. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna get pillows with it on it.
One thing I forgot to mention earlier on the Jungian theories, Borgli, in that very same interview where he mentioned how that script started, says that he doesn't even fully believe in Freudian and Jungian theories, and like in that concept of a shared subconscious, and in particularly the theory that within our dreams all of our deepest secrets are revealed or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he thought the concept was interesting enough to explore for a story, and that's fascinating to me because that's kind of how I feel about religion. If I had to define myself, I guess I'm agnostic atheist, but several of my favorite movies definitely have religious themes in them, because I think exploring those ideas just gives a great amount of potential for stories, for how what it tells about the human nature. For there's a lot of stories to be told with religious themes, even if you don't fully believe in that. And I think that's just an interesting approach to storytelling.
I fully agree. I always like to say that I really like mythologies. It doesn't matter if it's Chinese mythologies, like the Journey to the West type stuff, or it's Greek mythologies and Artemis and Ares type stuff,
or Irish stuff with cartoon saloon movies.
Yeah, whatever that is.
Wolfwalkers, Song of the.
Oh, okay, no, yeah, I haven't seen that yet. Secret of Kells, right? Those ones.
Yeah, exactly. All of those are based on like Irish folklore. Yeah,
there you go. I love that kind of stuff. I love folklore and mythology and all those kind of things. And so to me, often first there's a lot to learn from mythology and in the parallels of life and stuff, like you're saying, and like what it can represent in mythology. And to me, honestly, a lot of times religious movies are just Christian mythology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's
sure.
kind of the same way I view it. So like, because I also like movies that use a lot of religious imagery sometimes. I didn't really realize, like I said earlier, that this was going to be filmed so centered on the idea of cancel culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until she lost her job. That was the moment. It was pretty late in the movie, to be honest, that I was like, oh shit, that's what this is alluding to. And I'm not going to lie, I was kind of annoyed at first. Because I wish, I thought what was going to end up happening was they were going to say, nobody's really having these dreams, actually. It's only like 5 or 6 people, and it just got spread because people were spreading it and lying about it or thinking. At one point they mentioned that, like, do you think maybe you're just misremembering because it's a dream and you're like remembering later and you're influenced by a person and your brain fills that in or something.
Yeah.
So I really thought that was what this was going to be. And between his apology and how you were saying, and you're correct, totally correct, that what he was saying wasn't wrong, that he was totally right in what he was saying. It was a shitty apology, but he wasn't, you know, he was telling the truth. Between that and the fact that they later find that you can really just enter people's dreams and that's like a thing, made me really wonder what the message in conjunction with cancel culture is, because it almost at that point gives the idea that like you shouldn't be canceling people anymore. It almost seems anti-cancel culture.
I'm not sure about that.
It's like a mixed message. It's like a mixed message. It's like a both things almost.
I think it just asks questions about it. I don't think it makes a statement really either way. Because as I already pointed out, with him trying to base this off this Jungian philosophy of the hidden baggage that ends up in the general self-conscious, this implies that even though he doesn't know or doesn't actively do it, it is still to a degree his fault, you know? So it's not like he's fully right when he says that's just another person. It has nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just asks the questions of there are maybe more sides to the thing, and not necessarily that says straight up don't cancel someone, you know?
That's definitely, because I mean, it's definitely asking a lot of things. I just didn't know if it was answering any of them. Yeah, I didn't really know if it was answering back to those questions. I really liked this movie. I don't know how much we can connect back to the other one. You know, this was...
I have something, but yeah, sure.
Oh, please do, yeah.
Not specifically being John Malkovich, but more so something I said about Charlie Kaufman's writing earlier. I said that Kaufman always has like one core concept and then he questions, okay, where would this lead? What are the results of those? And this movie also does this very well. You already pointed out that that startup at the end uses kind of this discovery of him as a proof for this theory of the general consciousness, and therefore thought, okay, if this thing exists, how can we market it? And that's such a real consequence that I didn't see coming, but that absolutely fucking would happen in reality. The second someone has a proof for the general consciousness, someone would definitely try to market that. It's so real, it's sad a reality, but it's so real. In a similar way, earlier on in the movie with the publishing agency or something, whatever he goes there to, I thought that was also a very cynical but very real way of how capitalism would try to use this phenomenon. How, you know, they would post this daily picture of him with a Sprite and try to manipulate people into dreaming about Sprite, and how they look at him as almost a person succeeding something, like going way further than any social media phenomenon, because he isn't limited to a platform. You know, they talk about potential reach and stuff like that with his dreams, and that his runtime is basically free because they just show up and they don't have to pay for the advertisement, really. So yeah, it's such a cynical way to think of this enormous concept and this enormous thing that's happening in this world, but it's so fucking real, and I couldn't help myself but be impressed by the consequences he found from this concept.
I like that it wraps up that, yes, he was really in everybody's dreams. Yes, there's this subconscious thing. I like that it wraps certain things up. I don't know if I would say if this was like a full-on other movie or if it was like a basis for a sequel, but I feel like it poses so many more things right at the end. I guess for me, first off, why is he allowed to have one of these things? You think that like the whole world would have been like, oh, you want to go back into people's dreams? Bro, no, stop it. You already did that. You're lucky you didn't get tarred and feathered over this. I can't believe you want to go back into people's dreams.
I mean, it's, you know, it's a startup in a new kind of industry branch. it takes a while before you get any restrictions in that. We just
Any
see
regulations.
we just see that happening with AI, where those AI companies just started doing whatever the fuck they wanted, and just now we're getting to lawsuits and kind of regulations being put into place slowly and stuff like that.
That's a really good example, honestly. That's really true.
So I imagine they would just sell it to whatever.
Yeah. But I also really like the implication that's kind of being made there, that like the whole world saw how horrible it was to have this person invade your dreams. And now one of the better selling products is, so you don't want to have those dreams where people are invading them because it kept giving you nightmares, right? Well, we're going to get rid of your nightmares. We need you to have your dreams invaded, though, to do that. Like, that's part of the plan.
Yeah.
We know how horrible it was to have somebody there, so we're going to get rid of the problem by having somebody there. And people buy it. People are buying into it. And I felt like that is a whole other message itself. That's a whole other movie that I wish... I know that this movie doesn't need a sequel, but I would love to see not Nick Cage, somebody else, another movie in this universe playing off of that idea. It'd be really interesting what they did.
There's even more things to question there about, like, you could make a whole movie just about the concept about consent,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if his wife is also a customer of this company. Could Nick Cage, in the very end scene, just enter his wife's dream without her consent? Did she already like him enough? Or what's the, just that concept alone with that product in mind is already a movie in itself. I
actually took that as she does still love him, but she can't publicly be with him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
She can't deal with this shit. She would love to still be with him, but it's too much to deal with. He is too much to deal with. So she'd rather just be with him in her dreams.
Ethics aside, I already mentioned those, but it's a perfect way to not only show the product that this all led to, so like an in-universe result of what this resulted in, but also show kind of finality to their character arcs, or like his emotional arc, because the things he does in her dream are basically fulfill her big fantasy. They had that one scene in the middle of the movie where he's like, oh, if I showed up in your dreams, what would I do? And what would you like me to do? And she talks about, you kind of rescue me out of a situation, and you're the big hero, and super basic stuff, but that's exactly the dream she has in the end, where he fulfills that role and he does something. It's kind of interesting that it's the first time that he actively does something in a dream. Not like that he does an action. We saw him kill people and stuff like that. But it's
his choice to do it.
Exactly. The first time he is participating in it, that he is choosing the actions he does, and that he uses it to fulfill the dreams of his wife, even though they are not together anymore. And we start with the dream of his daughter, and we end in the dream of the mother. And from a passive observer, Nick Cage, to an active participant in the dream, Nick Cage. And that's kind of a beautiful bow around this whole movie. Like, my God, perfect.
It really is. But yeah, this was a great movie. I really enjoyed it. I'm happy we covered this one. I don't know if I would say it's Nick Cage's like best film yet, his best performance yet. I don't know if I would say that, but I liked seeing him be something different.
I think it's up there. Like, I wouldn't say it's my favorite performance of his, but it's definitely one of them. He really embodied someone else.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of credit to the makeup department with like the beard, and I know that they had like a very slight alteration to his nose. Like, he's wearing a prosthetic nose, which is super subtle, but they said that it worked way better that way because, just by default, Nick Cage's face is one of the most recognizable in the world. So having him play an everyman they just wanted to ever so slightly alter his face into different directions and make it more round and all of that. But still, his performance, like his speech pattern is totally different.
Mm-hmm.
The way he moves, like his bodily performance, but also the way he has like little tics with his face and how when he gets uncomfortable, and it's all very natural. It really feels like a different person.
I would have liked to see a little more like him caging out in some of the dreams. There's the one where he like walks really fast at the person. It's very hardcore, swinging his arms and stuff. But yeah, somebody told me like, oh, he really cages out in this film, and he, Nick cages it up. It's great, but he doesn't. I was hoping for more like some of the dreams to be a little more crazy with him. They were him doing things, but I wanted to see him really, that Mandy energy.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
But yeah, good movie, man.
Yeah, great movie. Enjoyed it a lot. So did Nick Cage, actually. He calls this one of the 5 scripts that he just knew he had to do. Like the moment he saw it, he thinks it's one of the 5 most important films he ever worked on. The others are Leaving Las Vegas, Vampire's Kiss, Adaptation, Bringing Out the Dead, and this one is the 5th. So funnily enough, we have the Charlie Kaufman mention in there when he played Charlie Kaufman in the follow-up to being John Malkovich. So there's another little connection to you. And yeah, everything that's left is telling our listeners about our prescription for the next episode. The first film on your prescription is the new Todd Haynes film, May December. The Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore-led movie is an odd mixture of serious drama and camp tonality that sparked a lot of discussion online.
Our second prescription is the 1967 comedy romance The Graduate, directed by Mike Nichols. The film follows Dustin Hoffman as our titular character as he attempts to navigate a precarious romantic situation with an older woman and her daughter, played by Anne Bancroft and Catherine Ross, respectively. Adapted from the novel written by Charles Webb only 4 years prior, the film was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, but only managed to walk away with Best Director.
If you don't want to get spoiled for either of these movies, make sure to check them out by the next episode 2 weeks from now. I'm George.
And I'm Devyn.
And this was your Medicinema.